What is up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about my top 5 baits here for winter bass fishing, specifically for the month of January. Let me get my coffee up out of here. So right here, we're out here in the garage right now. I wanted to film outside, but if you are in the Northeast, I'm in Virginia right now, so kind of Northeast, you know we got a massive storm coming through. We have no snow. They're calling for snow all week long, but unfortunately we got wet rain and it is freezing cold outside. So we are inside today. So let's go ahead and get started in the video. Make sure if you guys find this information useful at all, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps out. So I'm going to be talking to you about a few different styles of baits today. First one we're going to be talking about the A-rig. It's gonna be my #1 bait for the video. First bait is gonna be the A-rig, Alabama rig, umbrella rig, whatever you want to call it, same thing. So this can absolutely tear them up during winter time. January, I guarantee you I'll have this tied on the whole month. I'll have it on the deck. If you can get into some schooling fish, this is a great bait. Make sure wherever you're fishing, you know how many hooks you can use. I believe in Virginia, it's 3 hooks. I have to check on that. I'm pretty sure it's 3 hooks. That's all I got on this one right here. This is just a cheap Yum, I'm pretty sure. This is the Yum umbrella rig. But can tear them up. Can tear them up for sure. So this is a great bait for this month. I have another one right here. This is an older one. I believe this was a Strike King. This one's got a little bit more flash on it. You know, it's got some willow blades on it. You know, if you need just a little bit more attraction, maybe their feet are really heavy, and you want something that's going to catch their attention a little bit more because you know there's a ton of bait fish in the area. You can do something with a little bit more flash. If they're a little bit more lethargic, still feeding heavy, but you know, you might want to try stepping it down and not using a ton of flash, maybe just a few less baits. Something to talk about, you always want to keep your hooks as far back as possible. This has got 5 right here, so you know, if I was going to run 3, I'd probably pick 1 on each side. I don't know, I mean, this is kind of a weird one to run just 3 hooks on. But you always want to keep your hooks as far back on the rig as possible, because that's the bait that they're going to be hitting. Something else is you always normally want to keep smaller baits up on the top, you know, up towards the front, and put your bigger baits on the back. This one is pretty worn down, as you can see. It's even broken off on this corner here. But an umbrella rig can tear them up if you get into some schooling fish. When it comes to bait choice, you know, this I think has just a standard, I think this came in like a Yum kit where you get these little swim baits that come with them. Personally, my favorites are going to be Kitech. These Kitech right here. This is I think it's bluegill flash. Yeah, bluegill flash. This is a great color choice right here. These are the 3.8 inch baits. Great ones right there. These are some more Kitechs. I don't know if you can kind of blur it out right there. This is the 3.5 inch swim impact. That's Tennessee shad. I like to go, if you're running the smaller ones up top, you know, 3 inch somewhere in there, and then maybe like a 3.8 on the back ones. Obviously, you're gonna want to try to use colors that match whatever type of bait fish you have in your area, whether you're fishing a river, a lake, reservoir, whatever you're fishing. You want to try and match your bait fish and whatever the bass are feeding on. So that is gonna be the A-rig. Yeah, you want to make sure you match it. Again, the brand, whatever you prefer. Kitech's amazing. Everyone knows Kitech's some of the best swim baits they got. So let's move on to the next bait here. Let's jump into this one. Jerkbait. More specifically, a suspending jerkbait. You want it to suspend. You want to be jerking it, get down there, and you want it to stay in place, because in the wintertime, you're gonna want to let that thing sit. You're not gonna be going crazy, just jerking that thing like crazy. Yeah, okay. You're not gonna be jerking crazy. You are gonna wanna give it a couple twitches, let it sit, give those bass a chance to get up to it if they're feeling a little more lethargic. So you want something that's going to stay in place. You don't want it raising all the way back up to the surface, and you don't want it sinking to the bottom. You're going to want it to suspend. Something you can do is if you have a bigger sink or tub or something, you can put water, fill it up, stick jerkbait down in it, see if it suspends. If it floats or sinks, you can always change out the treble hooks, put on a heavier one if it's rising, vice versa. If you're doing something weird like that or that, you know, you can put heavier, lighter hooks on the front or back to make it, you know, equal out. But that is going to be a great bait of choice. Here's another one right here. Ow, just hooked myself. Couple jerk baits. This is a really cool one. I can't remember which one that is. That's a really awesome bait. It's the 110. A great technique to use these during this time of the year is if you can get some brush piles, if you know where some brush piles are, and you have live scope or some sort of forward-facing sonar. It's kind of a newer technique that everyone's been doing. Try and jerk this thing right down to that brush pile. Watch it on your live scope and get her down there and just let it sit. Get it right down next to that brush pile where you know them fish are going to be hanging out. You know, you can never really do that before. You know, you could, but you'd run the risk of snagging, and you still run the risk of snagging with forward-facing sonar, but a little bit less. You know, you can at least see where it's at, and you can get it as close as you can to that brush pile. And that's part of the important part of it being suspending is you can get it down to that brush pile, and it'll sit there, and you don't have to worry about it falling, you know, sinking down into the brush pile and get snagged up and everything. So that's going to be a really good technique when you're throwing a jerkbait. You know, it's going to be kind of dependent on, you know, what your fish are doing and, you know, where you're at in the country, what your fish are doing. But that's definitely a great technique to use. So, stick these bad boys back over here. Let's move on. My next bait we're going to be talking about is kind of a little bit of a combination here. Rattle traps and very slightly wiggling crankbaits. Let's talk about the crankbait. Kind of lump these two as one. So you want something real slim, and it's not doesn't get real fat in the front and then skinny out, because that's going to make this thing dart all over the place. You want a real tight wiggle in this time of the year. You just want that thing wiggling around. You don't want it going all over the place. These fish, they're, you know, lethargic, not moving a ton. You don't want anything crazy that's going to scare them off. Good technique with these. You're cranking it. You're down there grinding the ground. You hit a rock or something, pause that thing. Let it pause for just a second. It's going to float up a little bit, unless, you know, depending on the bait, it's going to float up a little bit, and then start cranking it again. That little pause, a lot of times that bass is tracing it a little bit, coming up behind it. At a little pause to give it a chance to grab it, or at least give it a chance to look at it, see what's going on. That really will get you some more strikes. If you're cranking it and you hit something, pausing it for a quick second, and then before you start cranking it again, that will definitely get you more bites. A lot of different baits you can do for this. This is a shad wrap. By the way, everything we talked about today, I'm going to link it down in the description. Some baits, you know, some good choices to use for baits for each one of these techniques. But the shad wrap is a great one. Another great one, Tactical Bassin. I'm sure everyone knows them. They have their own cold water crankbait, and it's a really good one. I don't have one here with me today, but they make a really good one. You want something just real slim and just got a real tight wiggle pattern. So that's that, and then we'll move on to over here to this rattle trap. Same thing, you know, rattle trap, nice and flat on the sides, nice flat sides. They got a real tight vibration. Couple ways you can run this rattle trap this time of the year. You can just crank it, you know what I mean? Just cranking it, you know, on ledges and points, whatever you know, fishing. But a great technique as well is doing the yo-yo retrieve. If you're not familiar with that, tons of great videos showing you the technique and how to do it. But essentially, you're just letting it sink, and as this thing sinks, it just vibrates all the way down to the bottom. And then you're just doing a yo-yo. You're yank, yank, let it sink, let it sink, yank, yank, let it sink. And it's just a, yo-yo technique, real, self-explanatory there. But that's a great way to retrieve a rattle trap this time of the year. Get you a lot of great bites, tight wiggle pattern. This has got rattles. You can get them without rattles. It's kind of a, toss up there. If you're gonna go with rattles, that one, real loud. There's a ton of small rattles in it. I would recommend going with something, let's see if this one right here, a little bit more of a dull rattle. Not as loud, not as obnoxious, not gonna, kind of make those fish like, maybe not today. So that's what I would do if you're going with a rattle in it. Get something that's got a little bit more of that dull rattle, maybe some bigger rattles in it where it's not super loud and obnoxious. But that is gonna be our third technique, great technique for fishing this time of the year. I guarantee you every single technique I'm talking about today is gonna be up on my deck of my boat every time I go out fishing. For the month of January and for a large part of a whole winter months. So let's go on to the next one. And everyone will be familiar with this, a jig. You can't beat it, especially during the winter. I mean, it's hard to beat a jig. This is kind of my favorite all year jig. This is the Booyah Boo Jig. It's got a couple little rattles on it. I like to throw a 3/8 ounce, depending on current, stuff like that. You might step it up. 3/8, I feel like I get the best feel out of it. So that's mine, favorite there. But, specifically this time of the year, I might step it down a little bit and move to a little bitsy jig. This one's 3/16. There's no rattles on it. So it makes it more quiet, a little bit more subtle. When you're trying to trick these guys are real lethargic this time of the year. Try and trick them into biting this. You don't want something super flamboyant. You want it to be subtle, and you want it to not have a ton of action. A little smaller, a little bit easier for them to take. When I talk about action, let's talk about the trailers for these guys. When you're throwing a jig, I like a black and blue. You want something duller, in the wintertime, everything kind of dies, everything kind of gets dull, it's not, you don't want super bright colors. I like a black and blue, like a dark brown, stuff like that, maybe like a, darker green pumpkin. So those are kind of the colors I try and stick with, kind of depends on where you're fishing. When it comes to trailers, you don't want anything super, like moves a ton of action. You don't want a ton of action. A chunk this time of the year, just a zoom chunk, works great. Doesn't have a ton of action, beefs up the jig just a little bit, so it gives it a little bit bigger profile, but doesn't have a ton of action. Well, I'm gonna show you what you don't want is something like this. Guggen Rattle and Chunk, ton of action. Them claws, when they're going down to the water, are just flapping like crazy. You don't want a ton of action. You want something with minimal action. Even a bug, like I love these smallie beavers. This is like a green and blue swirl, something like that. Good choice. You just don't want anything that's crazy action, flopping all over the place, looking obnoxious. These bass are, lethargic, not wanting to eat all that much, hunkering down. When you're working that jig, take it slow. Roll it across the ground. Don't hop it like crazy. Sure, you can get some bites like that, but your best option right now is to roll that thing. Just drag it real slow, bump something, maybe let it sit there for a few seconds. Drag it real slow, let it sit. You're not looking for a ton of action this time of the year. You want to take it easy, slow it down, and give a slower presentation for these fish, and you guarantee you'll get more bites doing that, guaranteed. So that's about it for the jig. So this next bait is going to be finesse presentation. In terms of winter fishing, it's hard hard to beat finesse sometimes. You know, we're talking about moving baits, jerk baits, rattle traps, cranks, A-rigs, but when you sometimes just need to slow it down to get those bites. And my choice to slow it down is gonna be a drop shot. I got one tied up right here. Maybe not the best bait color, but a drop shot is an absolutely great choice this time of the year. There's a lot of different, you know, finesse presentations you can go with. Shaky head, Ned rigs, drop shots, all kinds of different things. I like a drop shot. You know, it gets it up in that water column. I normally try to tie about 12-inch, you know, to the weight, to the bait. Just gets you up in that water column a little bit. Gets you hopefully right in their face. I like to rig my bait, Texas rig. You know, got that hook covered because, you know, I mean, a lot of times they're hunkered down close to cover. And if you're running this thing through a brush pile, I like to have a Texas rig. You can do like a nose hook. You know, there's a lot of different options with rigging the drop shot. I'm sure you guys know a lot of them. But for me, I like to run a Texas rig, just personal preference. But seems like when you get it up in that water column this time of the year, when they're just sitting there suspended and you drag it right in front of their face, it just seems to get more bites, you know, compared to dragging a shaky head or dragging a Ned rig, something like that. This is just something, I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of drop shot. It's kind of a pain. Got this thing dangling around all over the place. But it gets bites. I'm telling you, it gets bites. You can fish this thing in really shallow water too. You're fishing docks and stuff. I mean, you can fish this thing in a few feet of water, which, you know, a lot of people don't think of. You think of drop shot in deeper water, but you can fish it in some pretty shallow water. Same thing with bait choice in terms of color. This pink, probably not the best color this time of the year. Happen to have it tied on right now, but I would go with something a little duller. Blues, blacks, greens, browns, stuff like that. You know, keep it more natural, keep it a little duller. You don't need a ton of color. But that's gonna absolutely get you some bites, 100%. And it just depends. You gotta kind of feel them out. I mean, there's a ton of good options this time of the year. Winter fishing can get you your biggest bass of the year for sure. They are super fat. They've been eaten. They've been loading up, and they are nice and chunky. So you can catch some monster bass this time of the year. Great time to be out fishing. If you're on a busy lake, a lot of times you don't have your pleasure boaters out there. You don't have as many fishermen out there, so you can really get the lake to yourself and, you know, really dial in. So it's a great time to be out fishing. You gotta try some different things. You know, not one thing fits all for every fish, for every lake, for, you know, every fisherman. You gotta try different stuff and figure out what's working for you, what's working for the fish you're fishing for. And that's just gonna take some time on the water, throwing some different baits. Try a couple of these out. If you've never thrown an A-rig this time of the year, if you can get on some schooling fish, you can tear them up. It's a great choice. A lot of people don't think of like an A-rig this time of the year. Think of fish being more lethargic, but a lot of places in the country this time of the year, them fish are not that lethargic. They're still, you know, schooling up a lot of times. They're still feeding pretty heavy. So you just gotta try a few different techniques that maybe you haven't tried out before. Yeah, so I mean that's really about covering it all. Matter of fact, I'm gonna throw in one more bonus bait. This is another great bait, so this is gonna make number 6 bonus bait right here. Spoons and blade baits. Kind of lump them together in a way because you fish them very similar. I just vertically jig them for the most part. You know, throw that thing out there, wait for it to hit the ground, jig it up, let it flutter down. Kind of slack line, this thing will just flutter to the bottom. Hit the bottom, jig it up. Hit the bottom, jig it up. It can really trigger some strikes. That's a bonus bait. Great bait to throw this time of the year. Personally, I really like these bigger like Magnum spoons. A lot of guys like the smaller blade baits. You know, it's kind of just personal preference again. I like a big Magnum spoon, but you know, there's tons of different options. Here's another one, a little red and gold. Something that's going to kind of replicate bait fish a little bit. But that's number 6. That's our bonus bait for this video. If you guys found this helpful at all, make sure you like and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments anything you want to see in the future and anything that I can improve on. Definitely let me know. And we're going to try and keep getting some videos rolling out for you guys. Thanks for watching, guys.